Good people, good people, good people. Welcome back to the Gumtown Podcast, episode 164. I'm Doug B. If you tuned in to this podcast, thank you for your time and your attention. I really appreciate you giving it a shot. Today's guest is the founder and owner of Wagnificent Delights. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I'm sure we'll all be inspired by her story. Let's chop it up with Kiara Doaty. Kiara, how's it going?
Hey, it's going good. How about yourself?
Glad to hear that. All is well on my end, too. First things first, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to chop it up with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Of course, here to talk about all the great things you're doing with Magnificent Delights and what you got going on with the business. But before we talk business, let's get to know the woman behind the brand. Born and raised in Detroit, what was your upbringing like in the Motown?
Okay. Yes, yes. It was eventful. It was always something to do. We were always into something. Somebody's having a neighborhood block party, or in the wintertime, we building our own hill to sled down. So it was a pretty cool upbringing.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds like y'all had a good old time. Sounds like you had a good village growing up in Motown.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. So you finish up, do your schooling up in Detroit, make your way down to
Mhm.
Montgomery. So did you experience any culture shock when you arrived in Montgomery?
I didn't. My family's from the South, so that wasn't a culture shock at all. My heritage actually is, in the deep roots of Alabama State. So, it wasn't a culture shock at all. I had family, already there. So,
Okay, sounds good. So it was easy to adjust making your way from the Midwest, coming down to the South, because you already had roots here. And the reason I asked that question is I know a lot of people that come from the Midwest down here. I know one of the things I've heard is the humidity down here is different. Of course, I know it is, and as well as just the whole.
it is.
Absolutely. So that's great that you already had roots here in Alabama, so it wasn't too much of a culture shock. So what led to your decision to attend the Alabama State University?
Well, outside of the fact that my paternal side of the family, we have some deep rooted history within the university dating back to Dixon versus Alabama. The individual Dixon is actually my relative on my paternal side. So that was already a big factor in, I guess, keeping a leg as, as attending an you. Like that was always a dream of mine, and my mentor pushed for it, so it just on felt.
Okay, sounds good. And that's great that you were introduced to the culture and already familiar with it and you were saying
Yeah,
like attending HBCU was always your dream. And that's amazing, Kiara, because it's so interesting hearing you say that because especially growing up in Montgomery, being from here, it wasn't even
hmm
HBCUs weren't even heavily promoted like that back in the 90s and 2000s. It was always Alabama or Auburn. So it's so cool that your family instill that desire in you to want to attend the HBCU. So I think that's dope.
appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. So upon arriving at the Alabama State University, of course, you
hmm
attended, graduated, did all that good stuff. So what was the HBCU experience like for you overall?
Oh gosh, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I probably had a little bit too fun my freshman year, but oh gosh, it was amazing. I wouldn't trade anything at all for it.
Mm. Yes, ma'am. I wholeheartedly agree. Nothing like the HBCU experience. And my favorite part of it was just getting a chance to meet people from all over, from the South, Midwest, East Coast, West
Yes.
Coast, the whole melting pot over there on South Jackson Street.
And you know what I always thought was cool? The Islanders that we would have.
Right,
That was always really, really cool to me.
right. I agree. I was them too, as well as I remember when I was going through my courses over in BA, there were a couple Canadians as well. I'm like, wow, how did y'all find out
hmm
about Montgomery, Alabama from Canada? And like you were saying, the island. So yeah, that was always cool as well. Just meeting people from all over. And hey, we all had a good time. Well, most of us had a good time in college, unless you were living up under a rock. But hey, the most important thing is you graduated
That's
and you
true.
got up out of there.
Right.
Yes, ma'am. So, any fun memories of going to the Rose, or did you stay away from the Rose while you were at Alabama State?
Oh gosh, I love the Rose. So my most fond memory of college when I started at Alabama, I was 17. So legally, I wasn't supposed to be going in the clubs, but at the Rose, as long as you had your ID, you can go. And I celebrated my 18th birthday at the Rose.
Hmm. Hey, that's all right right there. Nothing like the rose. I mean, hey, it was I put I
It was
put
a
you
time to be had.
hey, it was fun. I'll be honest with you. Like we were putting our lives on the
Yeah.
line because it was one way in, one way out. But hey, it was
One
worth the
way in, one
risk.
way out. Yep.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. No doubt. No
That's
doubt.
funny.
Absolutely. So you go on to graduate from the Alabama State University, get your bachelor's of social work, and you go on to get your master's of social work at the University of Connecticut. So were you on campus or were you
Yep.
online?
Actually, I relocated to Connecticut for those 10 months. So I stayed in Connecticut. I attended the Hartford campus. Like University of Connecticut have several different campuses, but Hartford campus was specifically a social work campus. So just like at, let's say ASU, the BA building or one of the other buildings is specific for that major or that major. The same was with their campuses. They were separate. So we couldn't live on campus even if we wanted to.
Okay, nice. That makes perfect sense. So going from an HBCU to PWI, did you experience any culture shock when you made that shift to UConn?
I'll say yes and no. It was because I, I I adjust really easy. Let's just say that I adjust really easy, so it wasn't really that big of a deal to me, or I didn't see it as it. But it was always a strange feeling because it was only about 5 or 6 of us there, like in the master's program, the advanced standard master program. There was only about 5 or 6 of us, and so we were all really close. And whenever you would socialize outside of class, it would only just be us. So we never really, I guess, had that opportunity to get to know them. And I don't know if that was because, we were all adults at that point, and living our own lives and, trying to figure out a way to have a social life, or if it was because we were already, I guess, established in our own ways that, you know, it wasn't the same as the undergrad experience, if that makes sense.
Yes, ma'am. That makes perfect sense. And I can only imagine, like you were saying, just in terms of everybody being adults and working and going about just their
Yeah,
everyday lives. And yeah, just the overall connection and building those relationships. It wasn't quite the same at UConn as it was at ASU.
absolutely was that.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. So you go on to get your master's, and present day, you are the founder, owner, operator of Wagnificent Delights. What inspired that name?
Yes, sir. Um, I don't know. It's because like I'm just always interested in knowing the depth of something or the magnitude of the meaning behind something. So we were playing around with names. My husband and I were playing around with names, and I would just like Google what is the meaning of something just being overall blissful. Just things like that, but blissful as it relates to a dining experience. And I kept getting, these random words, and I would just try to figure out how to make it pet related. And the only thing that I could come up with was when Magnificent, came about, was like, hey, let's just change the M to a W. And then I Googled it, and it was already so many other pet companies with the word magnificent. So then it had to go on to like what word relates to a human experience that can captivate them. And it was having a meal that's extremely delightful. So hey, I went with delights,
Hmm.
and we
I,
came up with the name Magnificent Delights.
Okay, sounds good. That's a very organic way, and I just love to hear those backstories about how brand names come about because it's just cool. I'm weird like that. Like I love the backstory. Like you were just saying, you were saying, hey, basically you were just playing around with words, and one thing led to another, and then we came up with Magnificent
Yep, that's
Delights, and that's amazing. Yes,
yeah.
ma'am.
Most people like go through this strenuous process to kind of like narrow down names, but no, I'm a geek. I have fun trying to figure it out.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. That's dope. Real dope. So you haven't gotten your degrees in social work. What exactly
Mhm.
led you into this space?
So we have two Yorkies, and I don't know if you know anything about animals, but like smaller dogs have more sensitive stomachs and can tolerate a lot of stuff. So we were buying like all natural stuff for our Yorkies, and they were like still getting sick all the time, and we couldn't figure out why. I mean, we was taking them to the doctor, getting all this medicine, to try to figure out why is our dog always puking. and it got like super, super expensive. And I was like, look, we're gonna have to figure something out. So I did some research on one of the treats that we had just to kind of, figure out if it's the food, it's the treats, or what it was. And I was looking at the ingredients and Googling, the stuff that I just couldn't even pronounce. And it truly was not an all natural product. So it was like we was buying something and being lied to. So we started making it ourselves, and I'll never forget, some random girl posted under one of my pictures and was like, "Dude, sis, you should invest in yourself." And then when I went to consider it, it was like, "Hey, why not? I am all about you know the equality of everybody getting equal treatment and fairness. You know." Just from my social work background, so why not extend it to this realm of the world too? I mean, our pets are like our animals, so it all tied together.
That's the parallel I was looking for. I was trying to figure out the parallel between social work and making dog food, and you just
Yeah.
completely brought it all together. Just want to do right by people in the social work realm, want to do right by
Yeah.
pets in the magnificent delights realm. I love it. That's dope.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yes, ma'am. That's amazing. Just hearing that story, the backstory behind what led to it, and even just looking at some of the products that you sell. I'm like doggy chicken and waffles. I'm like, oh yeah, this is a whole different direction. I love it. It's different. It's
I
dope. It's
appreciate
different.
that.
Yes, ma'am. It's completely different. Even the trail mix a lot. I'm like, that's different. That catches the eye. I
I
mean, for
appreciate that. Yeah.
yes, ma'am. So read where you launched the business in 2019, and
Hmm.
of course, right after 2019, 2020, and of course, all the pandemic and everything that went
Hmm.
on during that time. So, how exactly did you pivot and stay afloat during the pandemic?
You know what? I think the pandemic is really when we took off because people weren't trusting a lot of stuff being shipped in from different areas that may have had a higher COVID rate. And it was easier to get stuff from somebody you trust. So within my local community, it was booming really good. And then when it shut down, I had already had a name out. And I can remember one of our friends, she has a cleaning company, and she said, and this was right after pandemic kind of was, I guess, over and we were free to go about. She said, I went to a client house today and your treats were on the counter. Now, mind you, the individual that had the treat, she heard from somebody else that was buying them. And then from then we went to, start doing the local market. So the pandemic kind of helped push it forward more than anything.
That makes perfect sense as to what you were saying, just in terms of just that trust factor during the pandemic, because
Mm-hmm.
you spot on. It was definitely interesting time, and people were definitely on edge. I mean, I'm included. I mean, it didn't necessarily stop me from shopping at Amazon Prime, but I wasn't going out to no stores like that. I wasn't going out to no stores like that, but I definitely understand what you're saying, and that's great that you were already in business, rocking and rolling, and you were already in place to solve that problem for people that have dogs
Mm-hmm.
and wanted to buy those treats but didn't want to go to PetSmart. So, hey, you already in
Right.
position. Love to hear it. Yes, ma'am. So whenever I have entrepreneurs on the platform like yourself, I like to talk about three things: the aha moment,
Mm-hmm.
action, and audacity. You pretty much already talked about your
Ooh.
aha moment, just having your dogs and realizing that you all were feeding them, that the labels wasn't matching up with, what they said the food were, and just your dogs were
Mm-hmm.
sick, and that was your aha moment to launch this business. So let's talk about the action portion. How long did it take you after having that initial aha moment to come up with a name and get the LLC and get all that started?
Um, I kind of looked at how I would want to be treated if I was a consumer, if that makes sense. Um, People are more trusting of giving their hard-earned money to somebody that actually put hard-earned money into themselves first, if that makes sense. So I kind of, and I guess because that's how I am. So I felt it was only the smart move or the right thing to do is to go ahead and get solidified so that one, nobody can question anything that I was doing because I had, the documentation or the establishment to back it up.
Okay, so it sounds like the action portion didn't take long at all. You got right to it.
No, no, absolutely.
Okay, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. That's great that you had that mindset. Hey, I want to be legit. I don't want any questions. I don't want any doubts. Hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm solidified. I got the LLC. You can't doubt me. I love it.
Right.
Yes, ma'am. That last portion, audacity, is one thing to have an idea. It's another thing to put action behind it. But to put it out to the world, to be praised or criticized, that's where the audacity comes in my opinion. Who or what gave you that courage, that audacity to put Magnificent Delights out to the world?
I would say my first handful of clients gave me that to put it out to the world because it took me maybe some months to even start expanding or even opening up the idea to sell to people. Like when I first started, I was doing like a dozen for $3. You know what I mean? Because I didn't have the credentials or the experience or even anybody I can go ask for a review from to be charged, anything higher than that. So I guess they were kind of my test subjects or my sample base, and they kind of gave me the push forward once I seen that this client has been with me since the puppy was 9 weeks, and now they're 5 months old and they're thriving and doing amazing. So I guess they kind of help with that.
Okay, and that makes perfect sense. And salute to you for being aware. Hey, I want to get my brand off the ground and not coming out the gate charging too much. I mean, like you were saying,
Yeah.
pretty much you came out with a fair price, a reasonable price, and got some good feedback from your initial clientele, and that's what propelled you to put it out to the world. That makes sense. Okay, sounds good. So, just in terms of vision, so of course you've done great things with the company, and I know great things are coming down the pipeline, which leads to my next portion, vision. What are some of your short-term and long-term goals for the business you feel comfortable sharing?
Sure. So my short-term goal right now is to win again this year, Best of Baldwin County Pet Store for 2025. I won 2024. So my short-term goal is to absolutely take it home again for 2025. And you said long-term goal.
Yes.
Look, I'm trying to retire myself, my husband, my mama, and everybody that helped me get here. So that's the long-term goal.
Okay. Say sounds good to me, and those are great goals, short term and long term. And I have no doubt you'll make them all come to fruition.
I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. As we wrap up the podcast, I want to ask $1 million question. I started this podcast to highlight the greatness connected to the city of Montgomery. Whether you were born here or lived here for a significant period of your life, be it college, military, or work, you living in Montgomery to attend and graduate from the Alabama State University. Kiara, I want to ask you, what do you appreciate the most about that chapter of your life you spent in Montgomery?
Oh, the experience. Literally every experience, good and bad, it absolutely shaped me to be the woman I am today.
Hmm. Powerful, powerful stuff. So how can people connect with you, Kiara? What are your social media handles and website?
My website is Wagdelights, WAGDELIGHTS.com. And it's the same on Instagram and Facebook, Wagnificent Delights.
Too easy. And of course, I'll put all of the information in the description of the episode. Hey, Kiara, thanks again for the conversation. I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you. You have a good one.
Yes, ma'am. You too. Good people, that concludes another dope episode of the Gumptown Podcast. In the meantime, in between time, y'all know what to do. Be blessed, be safe, but most importantly, have the audacity to be you. Go on.